Hi, this is Richard with the week 1 feedback video. Normally I'd be here with Craig, but he's travelling the planet at the moment, spreading the mindfulness word, so I'm by myself in the studio. Each week we'll be making these feedback videos based on all of the most popular topics that you talk about in the forum. So we'd strongly encourage you to please keep contributing to the forums, asking questions, sharing your experiences, supporting the other learners. Remember to practice some mindful communication as you do that. And please also follow our mentors, Jen and Susan, so that you can keep up to date with what's being talked about on the forums. There has been some really great stuff that's come up this week. Some really good reflections around mindfulness, not just being something that makes us feel good or creating some kind of blissful experience, but sometimes taking us into some pretty challenging territory. And that's why this course is actually designed as a sort of part 2. So if you're coming into our online courses with this one, just know that we've also got a first course called Mindfulness for Wellbeing and Peak Performance, which kind of lays some of the groundwork. And you might want to go back and do that at some point next time we run it. So some of our learners became more aware of discomfort and unpleasant sensations, which is, of course, one of the first things that happens when we start to tune in and notice what's actually going on under the surface. Quite often we notice that we perhaps have emotions that we were unaware of, or we're feeling some kind of discomfort. And actually quite often the distractedness that shows up in our lives is unconsciously a way of trying to get away from that. So we tune into it, and that's a very important first step to notice what's actually happening there. And then of course we can start practicing responding in healthy ways, which means just to stay present with whatever's happening, not to react to it, not to judge it, not to get caught up in stories about it, just to be with it as it is. And of course, once we do that, as some of our learners noticed, we start to realize that discomfort often gets labeled as negative. We just decide that it's bad and it's wrong and we want to get rid of it, and then we start to resist it, and that's where a lot of our suffering comes from. So a lot of our learners have noticed that it takes a lot of mental energy to do that if we're trying to get rid of thoughts or push away emotions, or if we're reacting to things with fear and anxiety, that actually makes our suffering and stress worse. And so to notice these things is, of course, a very powerful and important step. And that's really what this course is designed to do. And it's been great to see that happening this week. The meditations have been really popular. We introduced a comma meditation, which is a short practice just as an introduction, and then a slightly longer 8-minute mindful listening practice. There's a lot of gratitude expressed, and a lot of learners were noticing different effects, some positive effects like feeling relaxed or calm afterwards, which is a common side effect of mindfulness meditation. Right? And it's nice if it happens, but it doesn't always happen. And that's what some of our other learners noticed, that actually they became more aware of mind wandering. And of course, we noticed that the mind's wandered, and then typically what happens when people are starting to practice mindfulness is they then judge that. That's bad. Why is my mind wandering? It shouldn't be wandering. What's wrong? I'm not getting this right. And of course, all of that's just further mind wandering, makes the meditation pretty unpleasant, but also it makes it even harder to focus on the present moment. And so the whole point of mindfulness is to start noticing what's actually happening. So if we notice that our mind's wandered off, that's just what's happened. It's normal. Half the time, at least, the mind's somewhere else. But then we can just start practicing bringing it back. And we bring it back over and over again with an attitude of patience and gentleness. And that's really the practice. So if you're noticing that your mind's wandering, that you're having trouble focusing during the meditation, if you're noticing that you're being judgmental with yourself when the mind does wander, that you're getting caught up in stressful thinking that's creating tension in the body, all of that is the mindfulness doing its job. So keep persevering with that, very, patiently and taking it easy, but also, persevering and keeping with the meditation practice. One learner noted that it's difficult to observe sounds without categorizing them or searching for particular sounds. And again, that's the meditation doing its work. Because we could think about meditation like we're practicing concentration, the ability to keep the attention in one place and to bring it back when it wanders off. And that's a very powerful thing to practice. But we're also practicing awareness, a basic meta-awareness. Where is my attention right now? But meditation's an opportunity to notice certain habits and tendencies in the mind. And the mind does label and judge everything we experience. In fact, before we're even consciously aware of it, we've already decided that we like it, don't like it, or that we don't really care about it and we ignore it. And so we can start noticing that with a meditation like mindful listening, that hang on, am I listening to the sounds or am I listening to my thoughts and evaluations about the sounds? And again, we just want to pay attention to that process so that we can observe it when it's happening. Establishing a regular meditation practice, well, okay, here's where the rubber really hits the road, and this is a challenge for anybody who's learning mindfulness. In fact, I've been meditating for 20 years, and sometimes I don't make time to meditate. It's very rare, you know. You reach a tipping point after a while where if I don't meditate, my day is not as good. But from time to time, it just happens. I wake up, I think, you know what, I'll do it later. That's the classic obstacle. And then later becomes later and later, and then I just don't get around to it. So I like to meditate first thing in the morning. That really helps me. And if you're having trouble establishing a routine, try not to get too discouraged by it. It's hard. It's normal to have trouble in the beginning. The trick is to persevere, to keep trying to do small amounts of meditation every day, 5-10 minutes every day, and to notice what's getting in the way. What are the obstacles? If you think, I'm lazy, this is too hard, I suck at this, they're just judgments. If you look a little bit deeper, what's getting in the way? You know, for me, it's usually prioritizing other things and putting it off. Maybe you're forgetting, maybe you're, who knows, just see what happens when you pay attention without judgment so that you can see what's getting in the way. Of course, as some learners notice, it's harder in difficult times to meditate. Well, I think that happens for a range of reasons. I mean, we all probably have realized that when we get stressed, when things are hard, we tend to, you know, get caught up in distractions and judgments, and of course the prefrontal cortex turns off and we start getting run by the emotional parts of the brain. And actually they're the times that we really need to meditate. So if you're finding that it's hard when you're stressed, when you're busy, perhaps realizing that's maybe a time that you want to be training your brain. As Ghandi said, one of our learners shared a Ghandi quote, which I love. I have so much to accomplish today that I must meditate for 2 hours instead of 1. Don't need to do 2 hours of meditation, but particularly when we're stressed, when we're busy, doing some meditation is really important, starting the day with that perhaps. The more meditation I do, the more I get done, according to one of our learners. And I think that's important to notice as well, that if we do meditate, if we do practice, are we more productive? Are we less stressed, less reactive? Are we even just more aware of when we get distracted so we spend less time in that default mode? All of these, if we're paying attention, can motivate us to meditate. And then there was communication, which is such a powerful application of mindfulness. And again, learners giving themselves a hard time. So this will be a bit of a theme this week. Learners noticing how unmindful they are in their communication or when they're meditating and giving themselves grief about it. And just remember this. Mindfulness is about paying attention in a non-judgmental way. And that's a really important thing. And quite often the awareness comes a little bit before the non-judgment. So perhaps you're starting to notice how busy your mind is or how unmindful you are in your communication habits. And then that judgment kicks in, oh, I'm doing this badly, I'm such a bad listener, etc. See if you can start to really cultivate that attitude of acceptance and non-judgment. You know, it's great that you notice that you're not really listening, that you're waiting for your turn to speak, that you're offering advice or judgments. That's good to notice that, because that is the default setting for a lot of us. And for most people, they're just doing that without any realization. So maybe be happy that you noticed it, and then just start to practice non-judgment around that. Okay, this is just what's happening. But of course, if you're aware of it, you don't just have to keep autopiloting through that. You could start to pause, really listen. You could notice that advice coming up or that judgment coming up, and just hold it back and bring your attention back to listening. So awareness and then acceptance. What does it mean to listen to meaning and emotion? Isn't that just interpretation? Well, I guess that's a fine line, really. You know, we listen to the words, and that's often where most of us are doing our listening. But then there's all that non-verbal stuff. So what happens when we pay attention to people's facial expression, to the tone of their voice, the rate of their speech? We start to pick up on other things. And I don't think that's necessarily interpretation. We might want to just suspend any judgment about what it is that they're saying, but we want to listen really deeply to the words, to the non-verbals, get a felt sense of what people are talking about. That's when we're really communicating mindfully. So listening, you know, the meditation helps us to just listen, and then we can apply that in communication. Of course, someone asked, what if you're a good listener and then somebody else is sort of taking advantage of that by maybe, you know, talking too much? And that's interesting, actually. Like, what do we do when that's happening? We're listening intently and someone's just talking and talking and talking, or giving us advice that we're not asking for, or communicating unmindfully. That's a time to perhaps just be aware of our reactions to that. We might want to pause and see if they notice that we're not responding. We might actually want to just maybe interject, or we could even stop them and say, hey, I noticed that you're doing a lot of the talking here, and I'd like to there are a few things I'd like to say. You know, we can always, I guess, call that out. And I'm a clinical psychologist, and one of the big principles in therapy are that if my clients are just talking and I'm feeling disconnected from the conversation, it's not a particularly therapeutic conversation. No therapy is happening in that moment if I'm not feeling connected. And I think it's the same with mindful communication. You know, communication is really about a relationship and about connection. And if we're feeling disconnected, maybe we're not actually practicing mindful communication. We might want to be aware of that, and how could we change things? What kind of meta conversation could we have with the person about that? And of course, it's harder to speak than listen mindfully. Well, I think that's true, right? Often there are judgments and evaluations and self-criticism woven into our speech. So to slow down and be aware of our motive and intention behind what we're saying, to say things and then pause and notice, is that really what I wanted to say? These are all ways of practicing mindful communication. So anyway, there are just some basic sort of tips based on all of the things that you've been talking about on the forums. So as I said at the start, please keep sharing, please keep supporting one another, please keep asking questions, follow the mentors, and we'll see you each week for one of these feedback videos. So until then, happy practicing.